Our first speaker today is Barbara Borges, and she will talk about how to drill down in Shiny. Please welcome her.
All right, is the sound okay? Awesome. Great. So this is not going to be the best display ever because they were not meant for this, but hopefully you can follow along. So first thing, where to find these slides. I also have it down there, but probably no one can see it. So just GitHub, eRum 2018. There's the slides, there's the app there that I'm going to show. And the other thing I want to talk right off the bat is basically the plan of this talk. There's going to be the main part of the talk is going to be basically showing you an app that demos the concepts that I want you guys to understand, which I've called drilling down, drilling through, and drilling up because I couldn't come up with better names. But it's basically the main idea of this app and of this talk is to teach you how to go from a granularity of data to a finer grainer data, or actually build up. So that's what I would call drilling up. But I think that's kind of hard to talk about in abstract, so I'm going to start with the demo, and you guys can see that. And then in part two, which is going to be a little smaller, I'm going to talk a little bit about the abstractions, how you could do things differently than I've done, and still follow the same pattern. I'm going to spend most of the time demoing the app. Again, all of the drillings down through up will be demoed, and I'll talk about the differences, at least in my mind, of those. They're also all implemented with dynamic UI in Shiny. So some of the most relevant functions, a lot of you, if you use Shiny, are probably familiar with render UI, which was our first dynamic UI function. But since then, in the last couple of years, we added a bunch more. So append tab, remove tab for dynamic tabs, show modal, remove modal for modal windows, and insert UI and remove UI, which is really the most flexible one because it allows you to add and remove whatever piece of UI. So let's, without further ado, go into, yes, this is really terrible, sorry. Yeah, this is not doing it. Okay, so I'm just going to basically talk through what's happening here. So the idea behind this app was to make a personal budget type of app. So this already assumes that you've got your data, and I can actually, show you what that would look like. Oops. So it would be something like this. I actually have it in Google Sheets, and I only have mock data, so there's only like 3 months there. But it would be, can I make this bigger? Yeah, that doesn't help. Anyway, the columns are ID, year, month, day, amount, origin, category, subcategory, description. So you'd enter basically a row per transaction that you make. I'm going to say right off the bat also, I think getting the data in this tidy format is one of the most challenging things about doing these types of apps, but that was not my goal, so I'm assuming you already had a way of having the data in this format, and then once you do, or a similar format, then that's basically partly what I'm illustrating in that table. So you have year here, month, day, amount, and category. I'm not showing all the columns, like there was a description and stuff, because that is going to be our first drilling down. So for example, if I click in a row, I can drill into that particular row and see all of the things in addition to the ones that I chose to display on the table. So if I look at this. I can see this was Netflix, for example. Well, you cannot see, but that's what it says in the origin. So that's one way, and that's kind of like the thing that attracts your attention in the beginning is a table, and you drill down in order to see the transaction itself. The other thing that I'm doing up here in these boxes is this is how much money I've got incoming, how much money I've got outgoing, how much I have left, and that is now kind of the part of drilling through, because if I change, so I didn't do data for 2018, but if I change month, this is going to change. So I'm kind of drilling through the data, right? And you can imagine, obviously, this is a mock example, so I don't have a lot of data, but if you did have a lot of data, this could be useful. So let's just change this back to all year, and all the numbers increase. So we've seen drill down, drill through. The other part of drilling down that I think is actually much more exciting than the table is if you have a plot like this. So this is like a tree map type of plot, and the area of each rectangle corresponds to the amount of money spent or earned in that category. So this biggest one, if I can figure out how this works, and I cannot. This biggest one is salary, for example, and then this is groceries, this is rent, investments, personal. So that's great, but the cool thing is that I can then actually click on it. Yeah, this is what happens in demo time. What is wrong with you? Okay, so obviously I did not test this right beforehand, but I will make the changes in the repo if you're interested, and then I'll just tell you what happens. So basically, all this was doing is I would click on the plot, and it would open a new tab with just those transactions. So if I click on salary, I would see all the transactions for the corresponding month and year of that category. And then as you can remove those tabs. They did have a little close button. You can see here, remove detail tabs. And now I need to get this up again. Oh, not the presentation, the app. So the other thing then, so sorry, so that was part of the drilling down as well, and I'm very, very sorry that I cannot really show you that, because there must have been a small change. So this is a talk I've adapted from February, and there must have been some small change in the package, and I tested just the main page, not the other ones. Sorry about that, but I'll fix that. So we've seen drilling down, drilling through. The drilling up part is kind of more abstract, and it's the one I'm kind of less sure about what even to call it. But it basically works like this. So you can choose a subcategory. In this case, it was entertainment. Let's change it to rent. Put a new color in it, and choose a function. So this first one was the sum. So that's how much I spent in entertainment. If I want to see the mean of my rent, which is actually a stupid thing because it's always going to be the same thing, I could do this. So you basically have a bunch of filters. You can say expenses over $100 only, or 100 euros, and groceries, create new box, and you can see this is how much I spent in groceries. When I spent over $100, if I put under and choose a different color, I have no expenses on groceries under $100. All right, anyway. And then, because this is all done with insert UI, and then these boxes that have no information whatsoever, for example, I can just remove, and that would remove UI. So I call this the studio part, kind of the creative part where you can do your own, kind of like these boxes up here, but you can choose your own, you can compare things. And obviously, you can also continue changing all throughout the app, you can continue changing things. So all the values will update in response to that. Yeah. So really quickly again, drilling down is when you start at like a table or a plot, and you can click or brush or do something, and it takes you to a finer grain aspect of the data. So in this case, it's a modal window. In the case that's failing, it would be opening a new tab right here, basically. With a very similar table, but just for that category over the period you've selected. And then the drilling up is starting from all your data and choosing how you want to aggregate it. Yeah. So let's go back to this. So I hope this makes a little more sense now. Moving on to the second part of my talk, so this is kind of the abstraction I was talking about. And it's funny that it's actually showing the one thing that did not work this time. But the idea is you have the starter element, which was the plot. But it could also be a table, it could be a leaflet map, or whatever. And then you've got some selection, you've got something you do that can be clicking, can be brushing, can be a dedicated button, as in the drilling up, in which I actually clicked. And then you've got a detailed element, or an aggregate element, in the case of drilling up. So it could be a new tab, a new modal, a new custom UI. This is kind of the logic that these drillings follow. At least so far, I've been able to always use this to do whatever I wanted. If it's a leaflet map, if it's a ggplot, if it's a table, as long as you can interact with it, which you can in Shiny, you can create new things on the fly. So again, this is the repo where stuff is. There's going to be some updates in order for everything to work. But hopefully you guys saw the main point, and I wanted to leave some time for questions if we have.
Thank you very much, Barbara. So now we have time to questions. So are there any questions?
In the back?
In the back, yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. I have a question about the remove UI function. So can you explain how it's working? So it's removing the UI, but what happens on the server side with the elements?
So, I'm not projecting anymore. I thought I was. I was going to show you the little bit of code. So there's basically a structure for these types of things in which you use observe events that are triggered by whatever the triggering thing is. And in those boxes, for example, so the trigger for them to appear would be clicking in the button. And when that happens, not only do I create the box, but I also create a small action button in the corner that then I have another observer that listens for that button to close and destroy itself, because obviously the UI that it refers to is gone. So that's basically what's happening. I wish I could... Oh, yeah, there it is. So the Studio tab, which is the one that had the most things, is basically this. You have an observe event.
I'm so sorry, but can you make it a little bit bigger?
Oh, yes,
because
for sure.
I can't really see it here at the back. Thanks.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. Right, so you have this observe event that is listening to the create box button that I have and doing just a bunch of prettifying there. And then the important thing is this insert UI, and I insert not only this action button, which is the X, so it is the cross mark, but I also insert the value box itself with all the things. And then inside of this observe event, I've got another observe event that just listens to that button that I created there, removes the div that I've just created. So the div ID here is the one, the same one here, and asks, it's just a random thing that I give an ID. And then I use ignore init and once equals true to say, just fire this once I actually click it, and once I do that, remove everything and forget this ever happened. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right.
A lot.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Hi. A quick question. Can you save all the things you add by, let's say, bookmarking it?
Yeah, that should definitely be possible. I'm trying to think if there would be a problem with things that are... So the thing with bookmarking is it will work perfect out of the box if you only have straightforward things. If you're doing dynamic UI, you have to use these functions called onRestore, session onRestore, and session onBookmark that kind of save the state between what you have right now and what you'll have when you access that bookmark. So it's definitely possible. It might involve some more work if you have a lot of dynamic UI. I'm sure there could be ways of simplifying that. It's not something I've thought of, actually, because I've conceived of this as very exploratory data analysis type of work, so data exploration through drilling, so I hadn't really considered how to maintain that. It will definitely be possible, just the amount of work that is required on the app author might be a little bit much, but...
Thank you very much again, Barbara.